Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. It's titled Preparing California for Maximizing Workforce Pell. And let me just give it a minute. We are recording today's webinar. I want to remind you that on your end, if you go to the More button, you can turn on closed caption. It should show as a CC, show captions. We should, and let's test it out, have access to also use our chat. So if someone could maybe type something in there, let's test it out. All right, Maria is posting. Let's make sure others are also able to type because today's webinar is taking place, yes, right after a 3-day weekend. So welcome everyone to the working week. We also know that there's a lot of questions, and I want to be completely honest with you this morning. This is a long overdue webinar. Long overdue because we knew Workforce Pell was coming. It is not just about other states preparing for us here in California, is how do we integrate a program like Workforce Pell to become just one more tool in the state of California, particularly for adult learners, for working learners in our state. But it is also about asking the question, which is how is California getting ready? And more importantly, how will we all play a role in making sure that we get it right for Californians? So thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are recording the webinar. We have a lot of incredible partners joining us this morning. And I want to briefly tell you a little bit about them because then we're just going to popcorn and be able to pass on the webinar. You will have access to all of our slides to the extent that you need them. And I also want to commit to you that from the California Student Aid Commission, we will likely have another webinar based on your greatest needs. So today we do want to hear directly from you. My name is Dr. Daisy Gonzalez. For those of you joining us, I'm the Executive Director of the California Student Aid Commission. The California Student Aid Commission, in the May revise by our governor here in California, has been identified as the administrator for Workforce Pell, along with other partner state agencies. The State Agency for Labor and Workforce Development will be a key partner in the implementation as proposed by the May revise, and you also have Cradle to Career as another key partner, particularly as it relates to data. I also want to let you know that there are other forms of implementation, whether it's regulations or phenomenal legislation introduced by TICAS and Assemblymember Irwin, that all play a role in this ecosystem. The purpose of today's webinar is very clear. Can it be done is not our question. That is not where we're starting when we think about our implementation of Workforce Pell. The question that we want to ask is how will we make sure that we get it right for California students? So if we go to the next slide, please. This morning, we are going to be welcoming all of you with an introduction by the chair of the California Student Aid Commission, Catalina Cifuentes. If we go to the agenda, please. After we hear directly from the chair of the California Student Aid Commission, you will hear directly from one of the students from the United Domestic Workers partnership with the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. This was a partnership to unlock student dreams, particularly UDW members who are contributing to our society, to their families, and to our economy. And the program then focused on making sure that UDW members could access higher education, and in particular, short-term programs. We also will then hear directly from our Deputy Director, Tae Kang, who will speak a little bit about the implementation. What do we know so far? You're going to hear directly from our government relations team, from Justin Hurst, in terms of what is urgent, what do we need to know right now, and how do we engage with Workforce Pell implementation. And then we're going to hear directly from TICAS, from Manny Rodriguez, who will be speaking directly about the Irwin bill that I mentioned and the student guardrails that need to be in place so that students in California can best benefit from Workforce Pell. We will then wrap it up and head directly to focus on two campus presidents who are leading this work and have a lot to share about regional equity. So this work is not just about a state infrastructure, it's about making sure that the ecosystem of student success exists, whether it's stackability of aid, protection of institutions and students, and more importantly, even thinking ahead, how do we actually use Workforce Pell as a tool? From there, we're going to ask you a couple of questions. What is next? What do you need from us? And we will advance and then close up the webinar. with a few closing remarks. So, welcome, good morning, and I now want to introduce the chair of the California Student Aid Commission, Catalina Cifuentes, and I think I see her logging in.
I'm here. I'm here, Dr. Gonzalez. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's great to see so many of you on, and thank you for joining this conversation today. It's our opportunity, California's opportunity to lead the nation in advancing equitable workforce education and pathways for our students. And I think the heart of the discussion today will be, can California lead in creating transparent, accountable systems that also recognizes all the gaps we have in different regions? We're a very large state. In my day job, I'm honored to be the chair of the Student Aid Commission, but in my day job, I work in Riverside County, California. I'm the executive director of college and career readiness here for Riverside County Office of Education. I get to work with over 23 school districts, charters, over 430,000 students, and each year we graduate over 30,000 seniors. And the conversation that happens in a region like mine, if you're very familiar with the Inland Empire, we are, even though we are number fourth in the nation of a metropolitan region of number of adults living there, we're dead last when it comes to college education, adults having a college degree. And what's happening is that means a lot of our students, they have to work and the importance of work. And we were very excited, and we launched the first direct admissions pilot in California with the California State University system 2 years ago, to focus on direct admissions. And I share this example because it all connects to this workforce Pell conversation we're having today. In that pilot, we accepted over 18,000 students in our senior class of 25. And we were so excited, and we thought they're all going to enroll in college. And even if they don't go to a CSU, they'll go to one of our amazing community colleges here. And I know we have two of the best presidents, I will say personally, two of the best community college presidents in the state on this webinar right now. And I speak of both of them highly. They don't even know I probably send them visitors all the time. And so I think it's important that we thought that. And what ended up happening is we only jumped 4% in college enrollment rate. And some of you may think that's a lot, but for us, it was something's missing. And so we've been phone banking. We've called over 1,200 students that met the A through G requirements for a 4-year college, that did their FAFSA, that did everything we've told them to do. Why didn't you go to college? And are you working? And what we're finding is some are working, but some are not even doing that. And there's a huge misunderstanding between understanding that I can be a student and a worker. It was either black or white. It was like I had to get a full-time job. They didn't understand what those dynamics look like. And that's the opportunity we have with Workforce Pell, to unite, to organize a conversation on that common message for our students in California. And so what we've had is students that I've never seen so many students after 6 months of graduation, they weren't doing anything, but they were capable, academically, all the above capable. So this Workforce Pell conversation, we may not have all the answers today. A lot is still coming down from the feds and from the federal legislation and local and different departments here in California. But I ask that we all stay committed to one thing, and that's these students. Our team phone banked over 1,200 students, and they need us, and we continue to call these students, and we continue to find out what does it mean? What does this look like? What will it mean for my county? What it's going to mean? I'm in Fresno, and I had to move with my parents, and we have to come together on this. And how do we balance this out? How do we bring these opportunities? These students are now gone, and now they want to come back to school. And what does that look like? They will be balancing work. The reality of my county is these students most likely have to work, and getting them to understand what does that look like, and all those different financial pressures and responsibilities. So this program can be transformative if we come together on this. And everyone talks about California's lead in the nation, and I do believe that. And we're fortunate to have amazing leaders that are trying to get ahead of this and organize this. But I think so many different opinions, so many different groups coming together is why CSAC's bringing this conversation to the table. So I, like you, look forward to hearing from our panelists. How are we going to continue the conversation? But how are we going to stay student-centered? It's not about the system or who gets to do this or who gets to do that. It's like, how do we coordinate ourselves in a way that supports the students? And I say that not just as a chair, but as someone who has, this week starting, kicking off, over 32,000 students graduating, ready and looking for guidance. And chances are they're not going to get those guidance at home because they're first in their family. They don't have parents that navigated higher ed. They need us to coordinate for them. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the time. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our student speaker. I'm super excited to hear from Sabrina Bishop. She's from San Diego and she became an IHSS provider to her mom in 2019. When her mom passed away in 2022, Sabrina decided that she wanted to honor her mom by continuing to provide care to those who need it and by serving her term as an elected leader of UDW. Sabrina is looking forward to continuing to fight to increase care providers' wages, raise awareness for the IHSS program, and come together in person to do the work that builds a stronger union. She is living testament of the dreams that Workforce Pell can unlock. Sabrina, thank you for being here. Thank you for your care and your love and caring for your parent. As someone who just lost my parent as well this summer, to caring for him, I know how much responsibility, how much love that takes. And thank you for everything and for giving us your time. So Sabrina, I will turn it over to you.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you who came together to give this tremendous opportunity to a person like me. As you stated, I did become an IHSS care provider because one day my mother walked out the house, tripped and fell, and broke her arm. She had to have 14 screws and a metal plate to put her arm back together. And so I share this story with people to let them know that your life can change in an instant. The independent life that you have today can change in an instant, regardless if it's your fault, a diagnosis, a car accident, anything that can change your life in an instant to where you will be needing an IHSS care provider. We are the ones who take care of vulnerable Californians, the sick, the elderly, and the disabled. Many of us take care of family members, others take care of non family members. When our union, our executive director, Doug Moore, presented this opportunity to us after talking to Dr. Daisy Gonzalez and other officials, the opportunity was mind blowing, believing that low wage workers could go back to school and somebody would help us because being low wage workers, we're in that bubble where we don't qualify for a lot of these programs and we don't make enough money to pay for it on our own. So having this workforce Pell was the perfect answer for us. It allowed us to go back to school, to pick what we wanted to do, not be concentrated on a bunch of filler classes that racked up a bunch of debt that we ourselves weren't going to be able to pay. I have family and friends who still have student loan debts 10 years down the road that they're still paying on. That was something I did not want to do. I am tremendously grateful because I was able to pick a program and I selected the drone program. That's right. I wanted to do something that was different, fun, but also lucrative. I know that taking the classes of being a drone pilot, I would be able to still provide care for someone else's loved one so that they could go to work and make money and keep those health benefits for their disabled loved one who could no longer work. Because I understand that the family needs to continue to support themselves because the bills, they don't stop. They keep on coming. After losing my mom, I end up taking care of my uncle. And after losing my uncle, it became very heavy on me because as an IHSS care provider, when you lose your client, you lose your income. And so I needed something that I could have, regardless if I lost a client, I could still have something that could make me income. So I chose the drone pilot program. There were 3 other women in my class, women of color. That was so impressive to me because it opened doors for us to be able to go into a program and not be looked down upon, be accepted. Sure, there were a lot of men, but the men were very helpful. I was returning back to school after almost 25 years of not being in school, learning about Canvas and how to log in, and all of those things were totally different from the last time that I had been at school. From the workforce program, I was able to receive a backpack with supplies and actually some fun things that kind of helped me through. When I enlisted in the drone program, I became tremendously excited about all of the opportunities and the new ways that drones are being used, not only in California, but throughout the world. We have a tremendous instructor here at Grossmont, Skip Fredericks, who is very well connected in the drone business. He even has opportunities where companies come to him and even come to the classes and explore the drone drivers, the visual operators. And it was very exciting to see employers come looking for us versus us trying to go and find an employer. So that made me tremendously proud. But at that time, I had not passed the test. I had not taken the test for the drone pilot license. That was an additional $175. And when you make $20 an hour, $175 is a lot of working hours. Fortunately, through the Pell, Workforce Pell, I was able to get that portion paid. I knew I had to pass this test because they had removed so many of the barriers that I would have failed and struggled and actually changed my mind about pursuing this career. I passed my test and I am an official licensed drone pilot. I am so proud of myself because it allows me to continue to be the caregiver that I am, to help other people be able to go to work to take care of their family members while I take care of their loved ones at home. It allows me also to have an income and be able to work in a workforce that is lucrative. It's not something that it's going to be phased out next week after I finish the certificate. It's something that I can just truly, truly be proud of. Windmills are using drones. Medications are being delivered by drones. Soccer is being videotaped by drone. There's just food is being delivered by drones. There's so many things, search and rescue. There's so many things that drone operators are using. And I'm so grateful for this program. And not only just the drone program, but I have other members who are taking sign language. They're taking sign language because we know we might have a client who is deaf and they're able to communicate with them, but they're also able to use their sign language skills to be a sign language interpreter. So not only they're using it for helping their clients, but they're also able to use that skill to earn an income. Sign language and interpret for meetings or video and other things. So I am just truly, truly grateful that one, I could go back to school, that all of the barriers had been removed so that I can just focus on getting the education and getting my license. I didn't have to worry about debt. And I knew that I was going into a lucrative business that I could start my own business with, or I could work for someone else. Drone pilots are making up to 6 figures. And who knows, one day you'll see me out there flying the skies with my drone. But I want to say more than anything, let's make this program work. It's working for me. It's working for many of our UDW friends, and more of them are joining it because they realize as low wage workers, when we lose our clients, we have to have something else to fall back on. Because if not, we are lost and life can be detrimental to us. Continue to support this program, and I will continue to speak out, and I will continue to encourage others to join because not everyone wants to go to college. Times are hard. Times are really hard. And a lot of people are going to lose so much in these next coming months and years. But to be able to get into that workforce and be able to stay in there and support your family is a true, true blessing. And I thank you all for your time. I thank you for your patience. And I thank you for coming together to consider how people like me, women of color, women who have went through a dramatic change. I'll share one personal point with you and then I'll end. I recently went through a divorce after 36 years of marriage. So yes, that was a big chunk of income that I lost. Trying to go through school, losing the income, losing my home, losing my family, and then losing my client. It was a traumatic experience for me. But I knew that if I kept my head down and kept going with this opportunity, I could make life better for me down the road. So thank you again for everything you have done for me, my UDW family, and for all of those who choose not to go to college, but have to go into the workforce. Thank you for making lucrative options for us to thrive and survive. I appreciate you all. And if there's anything I can do, please reach out. It would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. And a really big shout out to Doug Moore from UDW. I want to provide a little bit more context and really uplift and thank you for everything that you share with us, Sabrina. And I heard really clear things from you. I heard the on-ramps are really important. And so you talked a little bit about the even backpacks and aid, how those things matter to expedite your entrance into education. The connected systems that needed to be in place, whether it was testing and knowing the viable paths to being able to survive a test to even financial aid, work-based learning, and having access to individuals who were doing the hiring processes was really important. Feeling like you belong, whether it was your colleagues, your professors, the union, UDW, your colleagues, knowing that there was a job at the end of this was also really important. Connected to the future industry sectors of where California is going and where you could get a livable living job while still being able to serve your clients, your union, your colleagues. So thank you for that. I want to provide some clarity because I was at the state chancellor's office when we created this partnership. I met Doug Moore in San Diego. And the financial aid that these students are able to get access to with a very clear, innovative approach in partnership between a labor union and community colleges like Southwestern, who is here, those students were eligible for the Community College Promise Grant, Pell, and Cal Grant C. There were also several of the colleges who joined this innovative pilot who were utilizing their own state institutional aid, whether it was alumni-based or employer-based, to be able to make sure that these students could be successful. And now in today's webinar, we're now starting the conversation about how Workforce Pell could then be added on as another funding source for students like Sabrina, but more importantly, for all Californians who are interested in Workforce Pell short-term programs. So let's dig in. Let's talk about what implementation could look like. Let's talk about what we do know, and more importantly, how we can stay student-centered. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Uh, our Deputy Director, Tate Kang, will be joining me briefly to cover the rest of the slides, but I want to just provide this overarching background for us. The California Student Aid Commission is in the middle of implementing a statewide strategic plan, and we made three goals And among those goals was how we could create equitable access in the state of California. We have a very clear mission at the commission, and it's really is very simple. We want to promote educational equity to make post-secondary education affordable for all Californians. That means yes, adult learners, and yes, working learners. And we made it a very clear outcome of ours that when we invest in equitable access, so when we say we're going to work on equitable access, this is one of our goals, we, the Commission, needed to help California by collaborating with our segment partners to create financial aid for adult learners through high impact, short term career training and credentialing programs, which is why we're here today. That is what Workforce Pell is for the state of California. If we could go to the next slide. As we do this work, we need to understand who is the commission. Several of you are in institutions, you're advocates, you know who CSAC is, but maybe the behind the scenes is a little bit more complex, just like financial aid. But we want to offer this as our background. Number one, we already engage with K through 12. That means we know students and their parents. We also know a lot about them in terms of their financial situation and their jobs. We serve 2.3 million students every single year. We are the administrators of FAFSA, which is going to be the entry point for how students are eligible for Workforce Pell. We also have multiple years of data. We know who are those students who stopped out. We know who are those parents and their income level at this point in time when a student is applying for aid. And we also know a lot of information about parents and contributors throughout the entry points for students as they're applying for aid. We also serve all sectors of higher education here in the state of California. Next slide, please. And as someone who knows very closely the workforce area as well as higher education, again, this is not a question about whether we are ready. We are more than ready, California. This is the foundation. In fact, I want you to take a slide picture of this because this is what we are now adding on to. When we say we're ready for Workforce Pell, or yes, we're going to try to figure out all the answers, this is our background. We have AB 469, led by our colleagues at EdTrust West, to make sure that we were informing students about FAFSA and CADA in K through 12. That means that there are parents, adult learners, working learners who know about financial aid. And now, when we're integrating Workforce Pell, we now have to inform them that now there's a tool for them, especially if they want to get into high livable jobs and come back to earn a short-term credential. You also have a big statewide goal, a 70% post-secondary education attainment goal here in the state of California. We have aid like Cal Grant C, which is meant to help short-term program students here in the state of California. This is the state's investments. And I want to highlight just one more. We have innovators like Dr. Keith Curry from Compton College and Dr. Mark Sanchez from Southwestern College who have been redesigning early pathways mapping, whether it was through statewide transfer agreements or innovative partners like UDW, or even reimagining every single program that they offer to make sure that their data was matching their regional workforce shortages. That work is happening right now. Does it need to expedite? Probably. But we have systems that are ready to go. We have institutions that are ready to implement. Yes, a few more things that we have to figure out, but that's what we're going to lean into. And so I'm going to ask Tate to walk us through, now that we know that we have been leading, that there are students that need us to get this right, what is it that the landscape is offering us, particularly as we think about the May revise? So Tate, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. And so, as Dr. Gonzalez has pointed out, the Workforce Pell is just another uh, financial aid program that can be added to the many types of financial aid that can definitely improve a student's ability to access many of the short-term programs. And so this diagram shows just how financial aid just increases that on-ramp to social mobility. Next slide. And so, as we talk about what is Workforce Pell, let me ground us on what is it, right? Because this is the whole focal point of our webinar today. So I'll walk through some of the major state responsibilities in terms of the implementation of Workforce Pell. So what is Workforce Pell? Workforce Pell is often referred to as short-term Pell, and it is a significant expansion of an existing Pell Grant program. But for the very first time, eligible students will be able to use Pell Grant funding for short-term, career-focused post-secondary programs. And this all came about through HR 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, or OB3, as many of the financial aid administrators call it, which was signed into law July 4th, 2025. And again, the intent is to support students who need shorter, more direct pathways to employment, including working adults, career changers, and others who may not be pursuing that traditional multi-year degree. Next slide. Now, under federal law, governors or their designee, in consultation with their state workforce boards, are responsible for setting quality standards and ensuring that programs submitted to the U.S. Department of Education for approval meet the performance requirements established in statute. What does that all mean? It means that not all short-term programs qualify, but the short-term programs that want to gain participation in the workforce, Pell must meet certain standards. While the law establishes some baseline eligibility standards, many of the key decisions related to program approval, design, and oversight are left to the states. In practice, program eligibility will depend on both state level review and also federal approval. This diagram shows that in terms of the short-term programs, these short-term programs also have to have alignment with that aligns with high wage, high skill, or in-demand industry sectors or occupations. So again, not just any type of short-term program, but the program must meet the definitions set forth by each state that meet the high demand, high wage, and industry demand sectors. The program also has to have to lead to an industry recognized post-secondary credential that is stackable and portable across more than one employer. So again, has to just meet the standard that is the program is stackable against many other programs and it's portable across multiple programs. Also has to meet certain hiring requirements with employers. And so that also requires that the state consults with the different employers to make sure that these short-term programs, after a student has completed, it meets certain requirements in terms of the demands of employment. Next slide. And here are some other requirements for the short-term program in terms of length. Again, this is adding to an existing program. For participation in the normal Pell Grant program, programs have to be 15 weeks or longer. So the short-term workforce Pell program will now allow students who are in programs at least 8 weeks, but less than 15 weeks, or 150 to 599 clock hours. So again, really focusing in on some of the short-term programs. In terms of coursework modality, the programs cannot be offered through a correspondence. It has to be in person. There are some limitations to remedial coursework and ESL coursework. So there's limitations to how the program is being taught and also some of the coursework that is eligible. In terms of completion metrics, the program must have also a completion rate of at least 70% within the 150% of normal time. So again, students must meet this metric, or the program must meet this metric of at least having a 70% completion rate of 150% of that short-term program. And then in terms of job placement, after the program has completed, there also has to be metrics around whether or not the student was able to find a job at least 70% within 180 days after completion. The last return on investment metric is that the value added earnings requirement based upon program costs. And so what that means is that the published tuition and fees cannot exceed the difference between the median earnings and 150% of the federal poverty level. So the program should lead to a wage that is greater than the tuition and fees that are published for that program. So there is a return on investment metric to that short-term program. So as I walk through all of these particular elements of the workforce Pell, it is a lot to consider and a lot that is still being determined and in deliberation that is being had within each of the states and in consultation with the U.S. Department of Education. So really, the short-term programs that are eligible for Workforce Pell must meet all of these particular requirements to be eligible to participate. Next slide. So who can participate? Who can participate in Workforce Pell? From the institutional level is Title IV eligible institutions. And so what that means is that any accredited public, private, nonprofit, or for-profit or vocational school that is already participating in federal financial aid. So essentially, they are already part of the federal Pell Grant program. And so as they seek to have short-term programs gain eligibility into the workforce Pell, they must already have be participating in the federal Pell Grant program. And the program must also have been at least offered for at least 1 year prior to becoming eligible. As I walk through some of those outcome metrics, of course, that program must have existed to have to net those particular outcome metrics. For students, it's any student who's enrolled or wants to enroll in an approved short-term, high-quality career training program, again, meeting those metrics and those particular requirements. It could be a first-time student or someone who already has an undergraduate degree. So even if you have a bachelor's degree and you want to go back and engage yourself in a short-term program, you are eligible. As long as you have not exhausted your lifetime Pell Grant eligibility, so that is another consideration that institutions must track. Lifetime eligibility is usually 6 years. So if you did 4 years of your Pell Grant for your bachelor's degree, that means you would still have 2 years of remaining eligibility. So those are students who can still participate. Again, underscoring the fact that even if you have a bachelor's, you can still go back and gain access to a workforce Pell in a short-term program. Next slide. And as I walk through those particular requirements, it may seem very, very overwhelming and daunting to think about how do I, as an institution, and how do we as a state start preparing for this workforce Pell, trying to meet all of those particular requirements. And there is a lot of questions, and I think we're gonna just say that up front that there is a lot of questions and concerns. And am I ready? Are my short-term programs ready? What do I need to do to get ready for this particular implementation? And this section is really just intended to reflect both of those realities: implementation concerns that will involve some risk and concerns, but those risks are manageable and with some practical strategies. Below are four key concerns institutions may face, along with corresponding approaches to mitigate them. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but just some examples that we're starting to see surface from institutions and also from the state as we start to think about and strategize for the preparation of the implementation of Workforce Pell. So one, earnings-based accountability data that is missing. Um, data limitations are real, right? So a lot of these programs may not have the data to meet those particular standards, but they shouldn't prevent progress, right? Institutions can begin with where program data is strongest and outcomes are clearer, very, very clear, using early implementation to identify gaps and improving on process and strengthening systems over time, right? So taking the time right now to really start looking over the programs and seeing, what can we do to improve our data. Identity fraud, that is something that has always been a concern with fraudulent applicants using FAFSA to access federal funds. And we know that recently the U.S. Department of Ed also has increased measures to identify fraud, but that also means that institutions can do what is necessary at the institutional level to increase their measures in terms of technology and verification process. I know some institutions have already implemented ID Me to verify students to really decrease any type of identity fraud. Financially packaging, how does Workforce Pell, how does that fit into financially packaging and how would that work against other types of institutional aid? And so start doing some of the simulations and making sure that, oh, this is where it fits in. These are some areas that we need to start addressing, start looking at. And then lastly, if there's any types of structural barriers in terms of accreditation challenges that your institution may be facing, really start thinking about what it means to getting ready to um, getting your school accredited and addressing that particular concern. So yes, a lot of things to and concerns and risks to consider, but right now is really the time to start making those plans to prepare and strategizing and looking at these particular areas of concern. Next slide. As I wrap up, Workforce Pell, it presents a significant opportunity to strengthen alignment between education and workforce priorities, but also introduces a new implementation demands for the states and institutions. And to support effective oversight and program approval, states will need to access and strengthen their data collection capacity, particularly for non-credit programs that have not traditionally been captured in existing programs. Based upon the trailer bill language proposed in the May revision, CSAC would serve as that authorizing state entity and would be positioned to partner with the U.S. Department of Education, institutions, cradle to career, segment offices, and labor and workforce agencies to support implementation, data coordination, and program oversight. So the trailer bill language really lays out, CSAC's role in terms of providing institutional agreements, the review and verification of the short-term programs, the necessary data exchanges with the agencies like Cradle to Career. Also looking at institutional appeals to if technical errors do exist in the data, that an institutional appeal pathway is available, and also the statewide and federal reporting to report on outcomes and making sure that there's compliance to this program. And so as we think about partnerships, I'm pleased to introduce Manny Rodriguez, Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at TICAS. TICAS has played an instrumental role from the outset in shaping the policy and implementation guidance for Workforce Pell, and that work has helped inform the sponsorship and support of AB 1534 by Assembly Member Irwin, which would establish a state-level regulatory framework for responsible implementation of the federal workforce Pell program. So Manny, handing off to you.
Thank you very much, Tay, and good morning, everyone. My name is Manny Rodriguez, and I'm with TICAS. We are a national research and advocacy organization working in two primary portfolios. First, how do we make college more affordable? And second, how do we ensure that our students are going into and completing high quality programs? So Workforce Pell really kind of touches on both of those pieces. Before I jump in, I want to thank the California Student Aid Commission for putting on this webinar that is well overdue because yes, Workforce Pell does represent a major shift in federal financial aid, and California has a real opportunity to get implementation right. For my portion, I will be covering or discussing AB 1534 by Assemblymember Irwin, that is co-sponsored both by TICAS and California Competes, which outlines a state approval framework for Workforce Pell. And a critical component of this bill, which is a priority for TICAS, is that we're striking the right balance between ensuring that the funds can go out efficiently to students and programs while also establishing strong guardrails to protect students. The efficiency comes from the reality that expanding Pell to short-term programs could be transformative, especially for working adults, career changers, students seeking a faster path to employment. At the same time, the guardrails are imperative because we want these funds to flow to high quality programs because Workforce Pell grants will count towards the student's lifetime eligibility for the Pell program. And we believe that students should not waste their time or money on programs that may not lead to employment and can cause them to be financially worse off. So AB 1534 approaches this by establishing guardrails that raise the bar for the programs in our state by ensuring that they're not just, aligning with high skills, high wage and demand occupations, meeting hiring needs, leading to recognized stackable credentials, but these programs are also ensuring that we're meeting key protection guardrails that are not guaranteed in federal policy. Those include prohibiting institutions from charging tuition and fees for a short-term program that is more than the max Pell Grant. That means about $1,200 for an 8-week program or $4,000 for a 14-week program. Limits on predatory financing like income shared agreements, so that students are not pushed into private debt for these programs since they cannot access federal loans, and restrictions on outsourcing instruction to unaccredited entities. This is because we believe that without strong guardrails, there is a real risk that low quality or opportunistic providers will try to capture some of these funds. Um, that is because this expansion will likely attract new programs, new providers as it continues to be built out, particularly, private for-profit entities, unaccredited schools that can operate in California through BPPE and may seek to partner with accredited institutions to stand up new programs, and online program managers or OPMs. These are unaccredited companies that universities, institutions have increasingly relied on to operate online programs. Now, as we've been advocating for this bill, we've had ongoing discussions about how some of these guardrails may need to be adapted, especially in light of the final federal rules that were released last week, and we're open to those ideas. That said, it's equally important that any policy to implement Workforce Pell prevents any untransparent, unaffordable, or deceptive practices that can harm students. For example, we've already seen litigation related to OPM partnerships with universities to stand up and operate whole programs. In a recent Caltech and Simply Learn lawsuit filed by students, they allege that a cybersecurity boot camp marketed under the university's name was completely operated and instructed by a third-party provider, raising serious concerns about transparency and accountability. This is exactly why the guardrails in 1534 are so important. By putting these protections into statute, we ensure they're not dependent on future administrative decisions or legislation to retroactively protect students. California has a strong track record of setting a higher standard, a higher bar, including within our own Cal Grant program, where we have higher eligibility standards for institutions to protect students and taxpayer dollars. And this bill is following that same model. So to close, yes, Workforce Pell is truly a once in a generation expansion of financial aid, and implementation will determine whether it delivers on that promise. The guardrails in 1534, paired with the process outlined in trailer bill language, can ensure that California takes a thoughtful, student-centered approach that prioritizes quality, accountability, affordability, and real workforce outcomes for students. So we encourage you to continue to support this effort, and in particularly our bill with Assemblymember Irwin, AB 1534. Thank you, Tip, and I'll kick it over back to y'all.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, Manny. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank Assemblymember Irwin for her leadership on this issue. Now, if I may, I'd like to just briefly put this into context in terms of where we are at a state level and how we may be going forward to implement this program. So, as a part of the May revision of the budget process, the governor earlier this month introduced his revision to the budget, and in addition to that, introduced some trailer bill language. This trailer bill language has been discussed in committee. There were hearings both in the Assembly and the Senate during this previous week and are going to be considered as part of this process. As we head into June, the legislature must adopt the budget in both houses by June 15th to meet the constitutional deadline for the governor to sign by June 30th of this year. The new fiscal year starts on July 1st. That said, the associated trailer bill language can do, as the name suggests, trail behind, and that period lasts anywhere from July to September. So there's still opportunity to have discussions as we go through this budget process. Now, one thing I will mention is, as Manny just discussed, AB 1534, that is not a part of the governor's May revision process. In that light, you can view both that bill and the trailer bill language that have to do with workforce Pell as complementary. To the extent that the trailer bill may not address some issues, perhaps some of the guardrails that Manny spoke about, there is opportunity for AB 1534 to take that role. Ultimately, both will be important for how Workforce Pell is implemented in our state, and it is important that both are thought of as complementary for getting this program up and running, and that way serving students throughout California. Next slide, please. As a part of the May revision, however, the California Student Aid Commission has been working with our partners in order to advocate for some effective implementation for Workforce Pell. First of all, I would like to thank the over 38 organizations that signed on to a recent advocacy letter, and we distributed these in the budget subcommittee hearings last week. As a part of that letter, we're calling for a few things as an agency. First and foremost, we're asking for the legislature to require the Cradle to Career Data System, Labor and Workforce Development Agency, and the California Student Aid Commission to submit a joint legislative budget committee implementation plan that would include timelines, sources of data, types of programs that could qualify for Workforce Pell, and the ongoing administration needs no later than October 1st of this year. In addition, we're asking for the adoption of placeholder authority for the Department of Finance to work with the California Student Aid Commission in order to provide the Commission with position authority and associated resources that would be needed to implement this new program throughout our state. And lastly, and as you'll hear a little bit more about later, we're asking for the adoption of a modernization plan for Cal Grant C in concept with a joint legislative budget committee report on the impact of that modernization for students in terms of its effectiveness to adult learner success and California's ability to maximize federal reimbursements. As a part of our advocacy, we're emphasizing the importance of stackability of aid, as one program alone may not be able to make the full difference for a student to attend a program. Next slide, please. And lastly, before I hand it off to our next speakers, I would like to pose a few key questions. And I would encourage anyone in the chat, in the Q&A function, or if you are inclined to have a longer discussion with us, you can reach out to the email provided below. The first question that we'll pose is, as financial aid administrators or institutions or practitioners, what support do you need from the California Student Aid Commission, from the Cradle to Career Data System, or the other relevant state agencies that are responsible for implementation? As advocates, what protections are your organizations looking for? And as California advances implementation, what professional development is needed for you and your organizations? And lastly, I'll pose the general question. What questions do you still need answers for that we haven't addressed here as a part of this webinar? Next slide, please. All right, heading into the last portion, we're going to look at leading the way for regional equity with our two guest speakers, Dr. Keith Curry and Dr. Mark Sanchez. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Dr. Curry.
Thank you very much, Justin, and also thank you very much, Dr. Gonzalez, for this opportunity to share a couple comments in regards to regional equity and how we do this work. One of the things that I think is important as we look and work through Workforce Pell is how we organize at our institutions as around this work. What does our workforce development organization look like, and how are we able to support students in short-term programs to ensure that they're able to get a job once they complete the program, but then also looking at what's the aid that's associated with it. And so I think as colleges and universities look at short-term at Workforce Pell, what does it look like in regards to your programs that you're able to offer? But then also, too, how do you organize yourself around this work to ensure students are placed within jobs within their career based off that degree that are making livable wages? I think it's very important as we also think about, like, this is a moment in time where California can do this the right way regards to Workforce Pell and ensuring students are able to get jobs when in a short-term program. And how do we do that? But then also at the same time, looking at our programs to be able to see how can we make those programs stackable. So once they're able to get a job, they can still get more training and complete another degree or upskill so that students are able to make more money. So the opportunity is here. But it goes right back to, as I said, like how do you organize? One is how you identify those programs at your institution that are supported by the state and the data. Two, how do you organize yourself around workforce development at your campus? What does apprenticeships, internships, and workforce development look like as a whole at your institution? And then three, ensuring students are placed into jobs making livable wages. I think the moment is here for us to be able to do this work, but we have to be able to operationalize this and also maximizing the aid students are able to get. So not only are they able to get workforce Pell, but also looking to make sure that they're maximizing all aid that's offered at your institution. Because as we all know, the aid that we provide now and even the aid with workforce Pell is not going to be enough. You're still going to have unmet need for our students. And we cannot allow the students' finances to be a barrier for them to complete these programs. So the opportunity is there, and we have to be able to take advantage of this opportunity at this moment. But understand it's going to take some redesign within our own institutions with regards to structures. But the opportunity is here. Now, as California, we have to lead, and our institutions have to lead, but we have to lead with equity and really looking at who are in these programs, disaggregating the data by age, race, gender, and ensuring that the programs are meeting the needs of our community and our students are taking advantage of it, but especially from a racial equity lens and looking at our data.
Thank you, Dr. Curry. I'd now like to hand it off to Dr. Sanchez.
Good morning, everyone. Apologize for the technical difficulty, but great to be here with you all. My name is Mark Sanchez. I'm the Superintendent President of Southwestern College. And just in terms of where our institution is located, we're about 10 miles south of downtown San Diego and about 8 miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border at the San Isidro Port of Entry, which is the port of entry that enters into Tijuana, Baja California. So that's a little bit about our region. And we are the only institution of higher education in southern San Diego County. And before I get started, I just really would like to acknowledge the student's story, Sabrina. That really represents how this program can benefit individuals in terms of transitioning into the workforce opportunities in our region. At Southwestern College, we invested in a 2-year study to really look at where the regional workforce opportunity gaps were as it pertained to our degrees, certificates, and programs, and identified where the high wage occupations were in San Diego County and where we were missing the mark in terms of our programming, and have then started to work with our faculty to build that academic pathways, certificates, and degrees to those opportunities. It's interesting, some of the gaps that we found in our area. We found that our students had gaps with regards to a misunderstanding between certificate and non-certificate programs or credit and non-credit programs. There was also a gap in ESL programming and also digital literacy, which is important because that tells us that there's still very much a digital divide in San Diego County in the communities in which we serve. But we were one of the first implementers, early implementers of the partnership with the Chancellor's Office, working with the United Domestic Workers in creating pathways for low-income workers into the workforce opportunities that exist in San Diego County. And we started off with childcare workers and really moving the frontline childcare workers into supervisory roles within their organizations. And with that, there was accordingly a pay raise with the increased responsibility within the field. This is important because we know San Diego is often either first or second in terms of most expensive places to live in California. So creating these pathways to more sustainable living wage careers in our area is critical. And I think many areas in California can speak to that. But what I will say about Workforce Pell and the new programming is we've got to build a lot of infrastructure into how we operate this, and really specifically around identifying the programs and the students who should be benefiting from these resources, making sure that we're tracking the programs and their success rates so that we know that we are indeed creating pathways to these opportunities for our low-income communities that we serve, and then tracking the earnings for our students once they complete the programs and go into the workforce to ensure that we're doing what we actually say that we're doing. But that's going to come with a lot of infrastructure, data tracking, and I really like how Justin talked about the modernization of Cal Grant C, long overdue, but also understanding that we have to create a runway so that we create the resources and the training for our financial aid offices, because ultimately it's going to create a lot of responsibility for our financial aid offices to ensure that we're tracking the data for validation on which students are eligible for these programs, how we're delivering the aid, and then how we're reporting accordingly. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity for us to build this infrastructure with CSAC, our local workforce, regional areas, and like Dr. Keith Curry said, really build the programming the right way so that we're ensuring that the community colleges are at the forefront of delivering this program because it's what we do, but also ensuring that we truly are creating pathways to better living conditions, better career opportunities for the communities in which we serve.
Thank you, President Sanchez. Thank you, President Curry. I want to elevate some of the things that I heard directly from you and just ask you all to take a picture of this slide because today was an introductory webinar. Again, a long time coming. This is work that we should have been doing 8 months ago as a state. As you all know, there are several states, 3, who have already adopted legislation very similar to the one that Tikas has mentioned. 6 more are currently debating that legislation currently in their own legislatures. But here in California, we are diverse, we are unique, we are innovating all the way from Southwestern College, closest to the border, a unique community that is focused on livable living wages and beyond. How do you take someone who's already in a job and make them a supervisor and help them dream even bigger? That's the work that Dr. Sanchez is leading at Southwestern College. How do you lead in a community like Compton College, like Dr. Curry, who's not just reimagining the workforce of today, but is thinking 10, 15 years ahead to where his students and their families need to be, and not just thinking about it in terms of a single program or a single class. He's thinking about it in a way that is bigger, beyond that. He's thinking about basic needs, security for his students, and the stackability of aid is in the middle of all of that. So I believe in California, we are not just ready for this new opportunity, but we need to get ready for Workforce Pell. I saw a number of you ask questions about how do I know what programs are eligible? What kind of data can I pull? This is a graphic that was designed and is very similar to where many other states are right now. So this is homework for all of us. By the time we have our next webinar, and especially if you are one of our colleagues who is leading a nonprofit, advocating in this space, certainly we need to bring more of our partners along when it comes to those who are working on economic development and workforce partnerships. But for those of us that are here, and especially if you're at a campus or you're leading a nonprofit or an advocacy organization, we need to ramp up a system that can help us expedite identifying programs. So that's something that we need to be doing at the statewide level and locally. We need everyone that is focused on aligning outcomes to the minimum federal participation outcomes to be aligned, whether it's locally, start looking at your data, start identifying those programs that are important to your region. Here in the state, we're going to stay focused on the May revised trailer bill language so that we can help you all expedite that. Locally, you're also then identifying your articulation options. That means having tough conversations with your faculty, honest conversations about what it's going to take to articulate a pathway. Maybe a program is not ready now, but could you be ready a year from now? That's the potential of Workforce Pell. Mapping out the on-ramps from one course to the next one seems hard, but now imagine if you are that student who is dreaming, like Sabrina, of that top job, and maybe you don't even know what else is possible. That's what students like Sabrina need the rest of us to do. We need to build the on-ramps at the state institutions with employers. And then we need to track our outcomes because that's the only way that when we are implementing this, we will simultaneously be ready for the next set of advocacy at the federal level, at the state level. Because yes, we do need to modernize Cal Grant C because as much as we want stackability of programs, we need stackability of financial aid. But we also know that we also need paid work-based learning. We need stronger on-ramps to apprenticeships. And all of those things should be paid. And that's just the beginning because that is what Californians need us to develop. So thank you for being here today. We look forward to hearing directly from all of you via email, and certainly please stay engaged. We may revise. We look forward to hosting the next webinar with many other partners who will be a part of implementation. For now, consider it just the beginning of a conversation. Thank you, everyone. Happy Wednesday.